Hello everybody, welcome, and this is TV Hub Official 1 with the very second edition of the Red Dwarf review series, and this time we're going to do Future Echoes, the ever popular, with its sci-fi elements that brought the show to a new level. Even though this is only the second episode, it wasn't actually recorded as the second episode, but we're going to do it in this way because we're going to work chronologically through the episodes. So I hope you guys enjoy this, and make sure to comment below when you finish watching this video just to give your thoughts on this episode, as well as me, and what you think of my review, and just tell me what you think in general. So this episode was written by Rob Grant and Doug Naylor and directed by Ed Bye. We now begin the episode with an SOS distress call from Holly, who introduces us and gives us just a recap of who is the only survivors on board the ship, which is Dave Lister, surviving 3 million years in suspended animation. The other crew are dead from radiation leak. His pregnant cat was safely sealed in a hold, and the life form of cat evolved from Frankenstein's descendants. Also, Arnold Rimmer, a hologramic simulation of one dead crew, has been brought back, and the Holly is the ship's computer with an IQ of 6,000. So yes, this is the very first episode, the second episode, where we're going to be using just our 4 main characters as the plot device will thicken. And we have these 4 characters now actually in a situation together. Holly, Rimmer, Lister and Cat. So the episode begins as Lister is in his motorbike going down to get a sandwich with black coffee. Lister goes over to the robot and asks it, but the robot has a lisp and will not respond properly. This is one of the very first jokes, and is quite enjoyable at first watch. We are then introduced to Rimmer, who tries to look good in front of Lister by exercising, but pretending to properly exercise when he is not really. We are then introduced to the main plot of the story, as Rimmer asks for a haircut and a uniform, and Holly says that he is busy at the moment, as the ship will be going to be hitting light speed in 24 hours, and they have to navigate the city ship he has to through speeds never encountered before, and he will not cater to everyone's needs. Rimmer makes fun of Holly and is angry at him, and so Holly fights back and gives him crappy hair, basically. That is one of their next jokes. Our next scene is with Lister and Cat, who are looking over photos of Lister's. We get some funny dialogue of Cat, who looks at a dog and is very annoyed by him. Next we see that there's a photo of Jim Bexley Speed, who is one of Lister's idols and a zero-G football player, and actually will come into a bit of the story slightly, as there will be a bit of connection there. Rimmer comes in and looks over as Lister is packing away to go into stasis, not just for the 24 hours, but also for the remainder of the journey, which will be 3 million years. Lister thought that they could just turn off Rimmer, and that when 3 million years will be up, they'll be back at Earth. But Rimmer does not want to be left alone for 3 million years, and does not want to be turned off. Then they discuss the fact that Rimmer is dead, and this is a good scene, as Lister thinks he's the same, with no handicaps. But Lister knows they will have to go into stasis if he would like to return to Earth. They argue about Rimmer being turned off, and we get to know that Rimmer has taken his astronavigation exam 10 times, showing determination, in another bit of dialogue in that same scene. In the same piece of dialogue, we get to know that Lister thinks that death will not be a problem when they get back to Earth, and Earth could be blown up. Rimmer calls Lister a git, still hatred and conflict, obviously early on, and this is what sort of the 2 first seasons are based on. Now the story of sci-fi begins in the episode, as we get to the point where we get a good scene where Lister is shaving, and he notices that in the mirror it's already different for the one is Lister has a cut on him, and he calls to Rimmer, who Rimmer comes over and looks in the mirror from the other side, and then Lister looks down and he cut himself, and then he shouts for Rimmer to come over, and we see that this is a future echo, as we're introduced. The light barrier has been hit 22 hours early, and Holly cannot cope with it. In our next scene, Holly explains that they're travelling at the speed of light, and once you've seen something, you've already passed through it. In another scene, Kat is preparing to go into stasis with Lister, and Lister tells him to go and only bring a few bits of clothes. We learn that Kat cares a lot about his clothes, materialism. And then next, he walks into the driving room seeing Rimmer from Future. This is with the Lister scene, and it's a very famous scene that I will not really explain much because you can watch the episode. But basically, Lister sees Rimmer, he sees Rimmer, and there's a lot of stuff going on in that episode, in that bit, with a lot of timey-wimey stuff. They all ask Holly what is happening, and he explains that future echoes are when they're travelling through light speed, and they catch up with the future of themselves. These acts of seeing things will last until they drop out of light speed. As the story continues, the tension grows, and finally, Rimmer sees Lister die, and he says it is a nasty experience. Lister is panicked about this, but is trying not to think much about it, while Rimmer is rubbing it in the fact that he knows how he dies, and that the theory of that everything that is in the future he sees has already happened, anything that happened cannot be changed, while Lister disagrees with this. Lister tries to be hopeful, but Rimmer is rubbing it in. After next failing to stop Kat from losing a tooth when they see a future echo of Kat losing his tooth, Lister decides to confront death by bringing his club with him. This shows a lot of courage, and Rimmer comes on to watch. We see a great tense scene in the show where Lister is asked to go and fix the drive plate, which has been broken. Yes, so basically, it finds out that Lister does actually successfully fix the drive plate, but Lister was not the one who died, and they all figure out that it was actually Bexley, one of Lister's sons, who they saw in a future echo. They do not know how Lister will get a son, but it will be fun to find out, as Rimmer quotes, and this will come up later on in the series. And at the very last scene of the episode, we get to see Rimmer and Lister walking along the corridor, and future Rimmer, Lister, with two sons, Jim and Bexley, who are forced to take a picture of future Lister with Jim and Bexley, and we get to a Polaroid and the end of the episode. And now the overview. So the main points are that this show is actually quite enjoyable, with a lot of gags and a lot of tension also. It progresses well, and it gets to a good tense moment, and gets to a climax and very intriguing story that you would not want to switch off halfway through, as it is very interesting. In all, this episode was a very good surprise of the first season, and shows sci-fi so early on in the show. This shows that this show could take a different direction, but we do not know what will happen next. Unfortunately, Kat does not get a lot of showtime in this episode as well, but we do get to see a bit of Holly giving us a little bit of intelligence and a different sort of opinion in the show, and just a completely different character in the character of Holly, who gives a lot of plot devices and is actually very useful in this episode. In all, the writing is quite good, and the character development of Rimmer and Lister is really taking shape in this episode, as we see that even though this is not completely character orientated, is more of a sort of sci-fi look that rarely seen in series 1, as we will come to see. And the way that Rimmer interacts Lister interacts with Rimmer, and Lister interacting with Cat is quite interesting to see. How he interacts completely differently with both of these characters. In all, this episode was a breath of fresh air, even though the show only started with. We got good character development, superb writing, a few good jokes in there too, pathos, tense moments, an all-round great story with a lot of good ideas and greatness. The only bad point was that Cat did not get much screen time, and maybe a little bit more of the story could be shown off in the. If it was a longer episode, or maybe a two-parter, we could have seen a lot more of what the story could have done. But since it is a 30-minute episode, it did completely the best it could on what it had, and it worked brilliantly with all 4 characters in making them all get into the characters of the story, and a brilliant introduction for Holly as a proper role in the story. My favourite part about this episode was probably Lister, who performs outstanding in this episode, with lots of courage, courageousness, and just all around working well with different characters. I think that he will perform well as the protagonist of the show, and hopefully get to see more great moments like this in the future. So this has been my Red Dwarf Episode 2 Season 1 review of Future Echoes, and you can comment below what you think of this episode, and just make your own videos if you want to on giving your own opinion in full. I'd like to tell you to be sure to check out other people's Red Dwarf reviews, and I'll leave links below to just some other good stuff. So hope you enjoyed that in full, and can't wait to see you next time in our next episode, Balance of Power.